are a very interesting mix. Very quickly, Mr. Narayanan here, my friend, is of course from Titan Industries, looking at the retail end of the world and the retail training. And therefore, he's going to be the one who actually buys the stuff and helps us understand how we can sell better to him, since many of you are education providers in the audience. The rest of us here are all have done various forms of online, offline, blended, pure play, MOOC, and different formats. Let me switch gears. Vivek, I'm going to come to you. If you can quickly describe the company, of course, and the business, and really you've looked at custom content, content capabilities, and bringing learning into a format that's consumable. You want to talk about it and your impact and what you see really having shifted the last few years.
Sure. Can you hear me? So I represent Liquid. We are, we have a custom e-learning solutions business. We work with some large companies, HP, Philips, to create their custom learning solutions. And then we have our English language business, which we sell into schools and colleges and other people here in India. And now increasingly doing it on, as a mobile first, especially in this part of the world. So from a corporate training perspective, I think, what we've seen, so I'll tell you quickly what we've seen and then a couple of points that, first is clearly that there are a lot of change happening, right? Learning is there are a lot of restructuring, and restructuring goes on for months and years, right? And the new requirements come up, and people, so there is there is always a lot of flux, right? And I think the reason for that is that learning is at the bottom of the the traditional HR or learning and development is at the bottom of the priority, right? It gets cut off, first signs of trouble, and it gets cut off. And obviously the reason for that is it's not having, I don't think business people are seeing the impact that training should have. And there are two good reasons for that. One is, general sense, I think point that doesn't get highlighted enough is learning is hard, right? I mean, 80% of learning effectiveness, I believe, depends on the learner himself, right? Unless she's willing to internalize and engage and follow up and all of that, you're not going to achieve your objectives, right? So it's hard. Secondly, a school, we talk of dropout rates from online courses. Every child I know in school would not go to school if it was not compulsory, right? So dropout rate of schools could be maybe higher. So learning is broadly, I think, difficult, and a lot of time we underestimate the challenge, I think. Second, in a corporate especially, there's this 70-20-10 rule. Somebody came up long back, I think 50 years ago, which said 70% of the learning is on the job, 20% is sort of peer learning, and only 10% is the traditional courses, classes, that type of learning, right? And that percentage may be here and there, but that's not the point. I think most of us training providers are focused on that 10%. And it fits in nicely with the HR structure, so many hours of learning, so many people trained, so many man hours, so much blah, blah, blah. And I think that's making the training to be less effective. There are no good metrics I remember I had an engagement, I talked to one senior guy in HP, and I said, why don't we look at the social, interactive stuff? He said, how do we measure it? How do we measure how many hours, how many this and that? So I think the learning is now increasingly has to move in that direction, more informal, integrated with the workflow, when I want it, as opposed to what I might need later. It has to move in that direction.
Okay, thank you. Pure play content doesn't tend to get consumed as often. And so even in this era of online and self-paced and as much content and analytics-based content, if nobody consumes it, you don't get any analytics out of it, unfortunately. So, but I think, so then the notion of a coach, a trainer, because the experiences you described can now be done online, can now be extended nationwide or globally. You can do that one-on-one coaching virtually in the platform itself. Vivek, you were speaking about social as well, and peer-to-peer learning becomes even more important. That may be online in a chat fashion, it may be messaging, it may be discussion boards. So the whole notion of the LMS now seems to need to incorporate these sort of SME. What is your comment on that?
Absolutely. I think a lot of companies are, obviously Saba has been a great LMS provider, but a lot of people are now talking about sort of the beyond LMS world, because LMS, it's like has 100 features that that a lot of people don't use, right? And it's so new whatever beyond LMS or whatever you want to call it is going to be more about, I believe, where the sources of learning are all sources of learning, the informal learning, emails, Facebook, YouTube, whatever it is, and are all with the learner at the center, but more importantly, like you mentioned, a certification or a specific outcome, right? So it has to be specific outcome driven learning, otherwise we know that most learners don't have motivation to learn, right? And so that's the direction. So it won't be so much an LMS where these big systems where everything resides into the server. I think it'll be more an aggregator with an emphasis on user experience. It's LMS is today also, because of the structure, the content that you put in, sometimes the user experience is not as good, right? If you have a HTML5 thing, then, for example, the best user experience on the mobile is through an app and not a HTML5 page, right? So you need to focus on the user experience, aggregate bunch of content and track it very effectively. And one of the things is measurement is very, very weak right now.
Sure.
Right, feedback is based on that one form at the end of the day, which nobody really takes seriously. So I think a lot more you can do when you're online, but it has to be driven.
Last question.
Hi, Mr. Mehra, my question's for you. I guess my interpretation of the panel discussion's been focused more on the problem side, right? We haven't really delved into the solution space, right? So the problem, as I see, is that training right now is more of a push, The challenge is to create a pull within the corporate training domain. Do you think immersive gamification offers an answer for that?
Who wants to take that one? I think that's yours.
So see, pull, there's nothing training can do to create a pull in me, right? I have to want to learn. Training can only make it easy for me to learn, more interesting to learn if I want to learn. Right, so to her point, 200 million children in Indian schools, they're going into classrooms, something is happening. How many are learning? Very few. So a large part of it, what we've been talking about, learner motivation.